Hello, everyone. Today we are again discussing some of the questions related to Agile and Scrum and handling interviews. And I don't know what all will come up when we start talking. And we have a one professional, and she's willing to talk about her questions and experience related to exploring Agile and Scrum related roles. So give us a brief intro of you, and then we get started with our question and answers.
Hey, Saket. Thank you so much for connecting with me and giving me this opportunity to, clear out my doubts about Scrum and Agile as a topic. So overall, I have around 11 plus years of experience, and I have done program management role in different capacity over the years. In the last 6 years, I have been in the consulting field, and I've worked with different clients. I've handled and led various engagements, um, but mostly it was a service-oriented setup.
Mm-hmm.
Um, recently, my interest in product management has increased, um, uh, and in this context, I also want to learn more about agile because when we are developing a product, um, it's always the approach that is taken is more agile, and that's the best way to go about. So for me, the whole reason that I want to connect with you today is to increase my knowledge on agile and scrum, and we may learn a lot of things in theory, but in practical and in real life there could be a lot of other things that come up in the real scenario. So
Well,
that's what I want to clear. This could also be, I mean, these questions could also come up in certain interviews for me
mm-hmm.
going
Mm-hmm.
forward, and as well as I want to clear them as a topic to have more clarity on this subject. So that's the reason I want to start today with this.
Perfect. So let's get started with the question. So I understand that you have been doing program management and agile delivery, but more mostly on a service-oriented approach. And now you are more interested in doing product kind of a roles, and that is increasing your interest in agile and Scrum. And let's get started with some of the interesting thing you want to explore related to agile and Scrum. Go ahead.
Sure, Saket. So today I want to discuss few of the areas related to story point estimation, um, the Scrum Master's role, the Scrum team's involvement, the way Scrum is tracked, and product owner's role as such, and eventually some general questions around the benefit that Scrum projects would provide. So starting off with the story point estimations. Um, so now, as I've seen in some of your interviews itself, the other interviews, that Scrum Guide doesn't mandate story points, right? But however, the best way, or I wouldn't say best, but one of the best approaches to run a Scrum is the story point estimation. Now, my doubt is why story point estimation when eventually the story point is converted into days. And if we are measuring complexity based on story points, why can't the same be done through days itself? Because that is also a kind of measurement. Um, so I wanted
Perfect.
more of
Yeah.
to this particular topic.
So one thing is that yes, you can measure the complexity in the days, and we usually call them ideal days, and many Scrum teams end up doing it. Now, why ideal days? Because you don't know whose days are they. So when there is a piece of work and someone tells it, it's a 2 days work. Now, days has to associate with someone. X person doing this work without interruption in a when all dependencies are taken care may take him 2 days to finish it. Now, who is that X person? Many time in our project management space also, we kind of create a persona of that X person, a person who has been doing coding from last 4 or 5 years, who has a clarity of thought. And if this guy will do it, he can do it in that much time. So technically speaking, it's not a day anymore. It's a some measurement where we can say an average or an ideal developer on an ideal day may take an ideal amount of X time, and that could be again a measurement of size. So ideal days estimation can be a measurement of size. It has been recognized theoretically also as a one of the alternative of story point estimation, and I may like many may feel comfortable doing that. So there is no problem with that. There is no challenge associated with that. Now, someone will say, okay, when I have that, why don't I use that only? Why should I do a story point? Now, that's a fair question. You need to identify why do you want to do a story point? Uh, so see, estimation cannot be seen in isolation. What is the purpose of that estimation? And as you see in your program management career, there are various objective, and at the various stages we do an estimation. Sometimes you just get a 2-page requirement and your organization wants to propose a solution based on that, and they also want to propose that how much it will cost, and the solution will emerge in the next 2 years time, but it has to be estimated at that point in time just based on 2-page requirement. And I, as like a project manager, when I was working supporting pre-sales before 2000, I have done many such estimates where we just got 1-page requirement and we put a quote around it. Okay, this much money and this much probable cost and time it will take. So that's a one way of doing an estimation. That's a one stage. We call it rough order of magnitude estimate, and we may not be able to do a story point at that particular stage. Then someone who is exploring a product, and initial days, especially in the Scrum product development space, it's ways to do an estimate because you don't even have a clear idea of what the product will do. So in many innovative space, rather than doing an estimation, people just go with a time box iteration. Let's do something in this iteration and we'll figure it out as we go along. So there is a possibility initial few iteration, people may not do estimation at all. After few iteration gets over, then you start getting a need of some predictability. That, okay, can we predict how are we doing, how much work we have finished in this month or this time period, and what do we learn from this time period so that we can have some ending in sight. And for that purpose, we need to have some measurement system which can give us that information. So story point is useful because it is a subjective judgment taken by the team members. It doesn't take that much time, gives a fair amount of understanding of the complexity and the size of the work. You may spend another, say 20-30% more time in doing a better estimation, which may improve your projection a little bit. But since Agile works on uncertainty is an assumption, even if you estimate, you put a lot of time to find out what can go into these backlog items, but these visibility may change after 15 days. So whatever detail analysis you did is a waste of time. So we need to balance that, how much elaboration and understanding we should do before we can put a number to that particular thing. At the same time, what is the amount of predictability the organization is looking for? If the organization is looking for too much predictability, it will result into a reduction in agility during that particular time, and it will also result into upfront estimation and planning. Because the organization is looking for predictability. When the organization is open for things will evolve as we go forward, then it doesn't make spending time into something which we know is going to change. And in those contexts, the way story point has been explained might be useful. Now the problem is this context keeps changing. Sometimes when you are starting a new product, in the initial release, you may not care much about predictability. But in subsequent releases, you may care a lot about predictability, and you may have a sufficient amount of knowledge about your product. So your estimation accuracy is expected to increase as you go along. And during that time, you may start moving from story point to maybe an ideal days or something else, which has a more scientific justification of putting a number against the work. Because people want to know more about it. People want to know how predictable you can tell that this is going to finish in this much time. So there is a possibility of changing those contexts. So this is what I feel about estimation. Yes, definitely we can talk about technical details of story point, how it should be done and why it should be done. But many times I see professional missing the context in which estimation is expected to be done. It is not all the same, so you are doing it first time, you are doing it in between, and you are doing it at a later stage of a product development. All these three may require different I would say magnitude of details. What do you think? Yeah.
Sure, yes. The reason I also brought this up is many a times, the Scrum team is still getting familiar to the whole agile way of working. And, so having two sets of measurement, like one story point and then converting it into days, could increase the complexity. Maybe during the story point exercise, it could turn out to be simple. Then eventually, as the team progresses through the project or the program, days, sometimes they're talking about days, sometimes they're talking about story points, and that could increase the complexity. So that's where I was looking to see how we can make it more simple, and in what context do we have to use story points, because it is simpler because there is a single figure versus days, which runs into multiple digits. um, but
Perfect.
however, apart from that, if there is a simple task which I say 5 days and a complex task which I say 10 days, a similar kind of estimation can be done in days. So
Yeah.
that's where I was trying to see how to kind of
Yeah.
fit the whole benefits of storytelling.
So what I take from your sharing is that I sense at what point you are doing estimation. So when I'm doing story point estimation, I actually don't want to get into exactly how many days work it might take. I may just want to say roughly it will take 10 to 15 days. Yeah, it will take 15 to 20 days, 15 to 30 days. So it is going to take more than the thing which we have estimated 13 point. Yeah, because 13 point may take 10 to 15 days, but this is going to take more than 13. So we are putting it 20, which might be around 17 to 25 days. Yeah. So now this is a wrong thing
Mm-hmm.
in a way. You are saying you are bringing error in the system. Yeah, that is, yes. Why don't you say 21? Why you are saying 20? Or why don't you say, like, if it is going to take 17 days, why don't you put a 17 rather than saying 13 and 20? The idea here is
Right.
when it is expected, individuals and teams are doing story point estimation, they are not expected to get into that much detail of that requirement because that particular requirement may change in the next month. So what is the use of thinking about it? Is it really 17 days or it is really 21 days? Because finding out 17
Mm-hmm.
versus 21 will take time. Yeah, it will require breakup. Somebody will ask, give me a breakup. Tell me what all work is going to happen.
Right.
And that is expected to come at a later stage of your development. And at that stage, maybe you need to have a little refined understanding. And usually in the scrum teams also, by the time they reach to a sprint planning, they put into hours or days. And there are organizations
Mm-hmm.
where the stories which are expected to come in upcoming 2 iterations, they are well refined, and their scale of a story point may also start falling between 1 to 8 only, not anything going beyond 8. And that has a fair predictability that that the 5 means around 5 to 7 days or something like that, whatever the team sends, but it's an evolving understanding. So when you really want to
Right.
know exactly how much it will take, then you better use some other mechanism. That's not the objective of doing story pointing. We wanted to do
Right. Okay.
fast
So if
with
I
some
could just
errors. Yeah.
Okay, so if I could just infer in this, not set in stone, but then if I could just infer, if the team is evolving and it's a more mature team, and then after they understand how many days each piece of work takes and the predictability increases, they could as well switch to days if they are comfortable in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Why not?
so, and even in the service oriented project setup where things are already pre-decided that this particular application software product is going to get deployed and we just have to work towards the implementation of it, then I think days is much more of there.
Yes.
There
And
could be other estimations, but there's
yes, I do believe that. I do
okay.
feel when you have a context against what is going on and people want to have a very predictability and you need to justify why something is one, why something is not two, then then on top of that, if you try to do story pointing, it might be a little confusing. Better you use some other means of estimation, or maybe you stop doing an estimation and you start looking at a historical data, which could be the later
Mhm.
stage where you start estimating when this gets done rather than who does what. Each point has to be estimated. Or
Mhm.
will it get delivered in 3 days or will it get delivered to the customer in 5 days? That's it. That's the people are interested in.
Right.
They are not even
Right.
interested in how many hours you are putting into it. So these are like maturity of your product,
Right.
and this is how the predictability will increase. At the end, like later stage of the product, they will just ask, tell me the date when I get into the production. Don't tell me anything else. In between, I don't need anything. I have a
Right.
feature, and just tell me when this
Right.
feature is going to get into production. What is an estimate? And that's an
Right.
estimate people have to give.
Right.
Nothing in between.
Sure, that also happens when there is a fixed contract or the customer is willing to, spend that much of budget or money. Yeah. So in this context, going forward, I also want to understand. Do you have some tips as to when, if we go by the story point method and we are tracking velocity for this particular team, at what points taking up velocity as a metrics would make sense, and at what points we have to talk about capacity of a team? You know, generally when we're talking about team performance, it's velocity, but then how well we can use the capacity metrics as well.
Yeah. See, idea is pretty simple, and we need to see what is the use. And again, this is primarily from the user's perspective. So I would say capacity is something that before I get started, I need to know what I am capable of. Yeah. So say probably I am planning my product first time, and I say, okay, what is capacity? What kind of a capacity I have? So you can say we are going to put 20 people, and then they are going to work for this particular thing for next 6 months. So looking like this, we have a 20 people, 6 months, and this is the capacity we have available. Yeah. So initially, when you don't have any work, you don't have any historical data, any kind of a projection you are going to make it using capacity information. Now, when you start working on, you had a capacity, but actually how much you are able to deliver it, at what percentage of your capacity you are able to work, that you only know when you start working with the people. And once you have that data, gradually you start relying more on your performance data, which is a velocity data, which is your historical data, rather than your capacity data. Yeah. So it's like this. If I keep the software development aside, and somebody will ask, you have a shop, how many customers you can handle in a day? Now someone will say, okay, my capacity is I'm keeping my shop open from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. and I can handle 200 customers. But now it's not necessary that you will be really able to do that. That's your capacity. Now someone will ask, based on your last month experience, how many customers do you handle between 8 to 8? Then he says, based on what I have seen and based on whatever happens and the variability and customer coming as well, that is also a variable, and my service time is also variable. On average, we take 70 to 80 customers on a daily basis. So you when you calculate it initially, when you were designing your shop, when you were designing your manpower, when you were thinking of how should you put a layout, you are focusing on capacity planning. You're saying, okay, we have this much capacity. Once you have that execution going on, you start focusing on performance planning, velocity planning, or what happened in the last month. Now, similarly, you will see in the stages where the product development is at an initial stage, people are just coming and going. There are floating. You don't have a stable team yet. And the understanding of the requirements is also emerging. Usually you see a capacity-based planning. And then over a period of time, when you start seeing that things are getting stabilizing, then you start making size and the performance against size-based planning. So be it a velocity versus story point, be it an ideal days versus a velocity in ideal days time, or maybe it's a function point or whatever point you put in. But the idea starts moving to that, okay, how much work we could handle rather than how many hours we were sitting in the office. People start saying that, okay, how much work we could handle last month. And based on that, we need to quantify how much work probably we will be able to handle next month. So that's a more predictable rather than a better, because you have a more information now. And that's why you are doing that. Now, assuming if the shop has been running for 1 year, but the shopkeeper keep planning based on how many hours he's opening the shop and keeping his shop open, then he's not taking input which he's getting from on a daily basis. So similarly, if I as a project leader keep focusing on, no, I have a 20 people and I need to keep planning based on 20 people days available all the time, then I'm not taking the information which is coming to me every month in account. Yeah, so that's the only reason. We are not saying it's a
Okay.
right or wrong, but you're not looking at the information which you have in hand, which can give you, because other than people's time, there are so many things. There are interruption, there are efficiency things, there are variability in requirement, there is a wait time. So all those things are difficult to predict and estimate. But initially you just start based on,
Okay.
okay, we have capacity thing.
Okay, got it. So this, I also sense that this much of work may not be required for a service-related project, right?
Yeah, usually not,
Correct me if
maybe,
I'm
yes.
wrong,
Yeah, yeah.
because yes,
In a
okay.
service
Um,
industry, I do see a requirement of one particular metrics, which becomes quite common.
mhm,
They call it capacity versus velocity, or velocity versus capacity. So they look at a ratio. So
mhm,
that, for example, I had 100 working days available in this particular iteration, and how many story points I have done in this
mhm,
iteration. And that ratio sometimes becomes a little looked after ratio, because in a way it also shows that
mhm,
on average how many story points are taking how many days, in a way, because you are putting a
mhm,
velocity number which is coming from a stories points sum total. And again, I'm not saying it's healthy or
mhm,
unhealthy, but I do see in service
mhm.
oriented organization, many do measure capacity versus velocity kind of ratio.
Okay. Okay. I would like to revisit the service versus product environment a little bit later, but then following up on one last question on story point. Now, if the team decides the overall complexity of a piece of work, say for instance, is 10 story points, now the complexity of that work may be 10, but it could be that developer is doing it for the first time, so it is 10 story points. He somehow convinces the tester also, listen, this is, we are doing it for the first time. Somehow the BA also says, okay, listen, but I've handled such requirements previously, then they bring it down to 8 story points and things like that. Now, even though the overall complexity of the work is 8 story points, it could be less for the tester, really. How do we translate the complexity into the amount of work for that particular tester on that piece of work? Because the person might take, say for instance, 8 story points converts into 30 days. The person might take 30 days to develop that particular piece of work, but for tester might test it only the last 10 days. For him, the complexity is quite less. But if we go by that, then there will be a lot of outliers. Um, so
Perfect. So
how to
what is the
kind of
objective? What is
convert the
the
complexity into, yeah,
So what is the objective of this, doing this
into the amount of
conversion?
work?
So what
Yeah.
is the objective of converting this thing? Yeah. What do you want to achieve by doing this?
Converting it to days, are you saying?
Yeah. So assuming there is a, say, 8 story point work item, and
Mm,
and you want to,
mm,
you understand that this 8 story point work item will take 8 days to develop and 3 days to test, assuming. Yeah. And you also see that there is a
mm.
development time is more and testing time is less. Now, why are you doing this? What is
Right.
the objective of finding out these two differences?
So I understand, see, in Scrum, they all work towards one goal, and it's not an individual teamwork or something like that, or focused on individuals. But eventually, when it translates to doing work, though the complexity was 8, are you saying that the tester should also keep in interest the amount of work needed by the developer and still go with 8 story points, even though the tester's work would just be around 1 day
Got it. So see,
to
idea
test the
here
whole
is,
application?
when we talk about a size, it says that the understanding of size is from backlog to done. Whatever your definition of done, whatever it takes in between should be included in it, whatever is definition of done. So if it includes testing, if it
Right.
includes documentation, if it includes data migration, some script upgrade, some automation script upgrade, whatever it takes, it's a final number. Yeah. So now when we are saying, but yeah, there are different functions in the team and that may require a different amount of time. So the idea here is, and why I asked this, it's a cross-functional team. Now it might be needed initially when you are thinking of capacity planning, when you are thinking of team composition, that, okay, I need to think of a team and how many development skills and how many test skills or how many XYZ skills I needed in the team. Because if I don't have a clue, that I may have a 6 testers and 4 developers, or a 6 developers and 4 testers, or maybe a 8 developer and 2 tester. Yeah. So how do I identify that? What kind of a skill I need to put into that? So that is something I would say is a subject, is an important area to look into, the capacity planning of your team, or a skill planning of your team. Once that is done, once that is done, it is all about this whole team is trying to find out something, and they need to collaborate in order to get this story marked done. Now, if you see again, there is a gap coming in. There is always a queue on the testing side, or there is always a queue on the development side, that it may require to reshuffle the skills in the development team. You might need to include more dev or test skills so that overall work start moving towards finishing. Because here the intent is not that I have 10 testers, I will take the testers as many I needed. I have a 10 developers, I will take a developers as many I needed, and then I will put it, and then once the work is over, I will find some other testers. So we used to do in traditional project management, understanding that any given work will take how much dev time, how much test time, how much review time, how much UX time, because we were doing capacity planning separately in a different buckets. We were doing dev capacity planning separate, test separate, UI separate. But now it's a one group. They have a common goal and they need to figure it out. But having said that, at the initial stage, you need to have that understanding, because based on the nature of the product overall, it might be going here and there frequently, but that will not change my team composition. So as a whole team, I need to put a number, and as a whole team, they need to do an estimation. Does this clarify
True,
things?
Saket. So that's a good input to this this area that I wanted to have more clarity. But what I'm talking about is a single piece of work. Say you have a single piece of work that the team overall somehow has convinced, like a team of BA, developer, and tester. They've convinced each other that this is a 10 story point work. Now, but when it comes to, say, it's a typical development piece of work. So the developer may take 8 days to complete the work. The tester may take 1 day. The BA may take 2 days initially to design the user stories and all of that. So it is still 2 days versus 8 days versus 1 day of tester. So is it this story point? Is it a summation of all these pieces of work, or is it just irrespective of that, just that the overall complexity of the work is this high?
Yeah. So what is the difference between the last two statements? So what I said, what you said, one is that is the story point is a summation of the business analysis, development, and test effort. And the second thing he says is the story point just tells me the complexity of work. What is the difference between these two?
So the first one is more or less close to the waterfall kind of estimation. The second one is, irrespective of who does the work, it focuses on the requirement more than the team.
And what we want to do in story point,
right?
merge these two. So technically these two is the meaning of it. So when I say 8 points or a 10 points, it includes all the skills effort inside it. Yeah. So it's like, in a way you can say everything come together. This is what it will emerge to. And it is looked from the complexity perspective. So for example, the test skill person may say, this looks like difficult to test to me than the previous story I have tested, which was a 5-story point. And now for me, the 5-story point was taking me to write 20 possible scenarios, but this one is looking like a 40 possible scenarios. It's far more complex than me. So I would not be comfortable giving 5 to it. I will be comfortable giving 8 to it. So now what he's looking at, he is looking at what he contributed in a 5-pointer story. Yeah. Similarly, the business analyst guy will say that
Right.
for me, this looks like easier than the 5-pointer thing because I have a less complexity of work involved. And the developer may say, for me, it is looking like more or less the same like 5-pointer story. Now they need to discuss what is
Mhm.
the aggregate number they want to give. And they may agree to give it 8. That, okay, this all is making sense. Let's give it to 8 and then move next. So the essence here is the amount of time it takes to test, develop, and business analyze and all those things, that is considered when you are creating your team. Yeah. So if you think in a given work, there is a triple the time of development, less time of testing, then you put a 3 developer and 1 tester. So that automatically take care of the flow of work.
Mhm.
Yeah. But it is not like, oh, this is a
Mhm.
work, I need to give 3 developers to it and 1 tester to it. So that decision you don't have to take every
Mhm.
day. You have to take that decision initially when you are doing capacity planning. After that, you are saying you are the all you are. I don't know. It's the more testing work or less testing work. But finally, you just have these many test skills, these many business analysis skills, and these many developers like that.
Sure. I also wanted to understand this from the perspective because no doubt eventually the Scrum team is going to, estimate. It's a self-independent team. It's going to estimate on its own, run the Scrum goals, independently. But then somewhere it may need a guidance from a Scrum master as to how really to, if there is a conflict in this estimation process, how really resolve this. So that's where I wanted to, from that angle, I wanted to discuss that particular topic. So I thank you for this. Like the Scrum point estimation, largely for me, it is, at least the doubts that I had were, it has been cleared. But of course, practical knowledge is more important in a real-time scenario, and uh, probably I will get a more better understanding once I do it along with the team. So the next set of questions are more around the Scrum team itself. Moving on from the story points. Um, Now, once the estimation and all of it is done, we also know that sprint planning is not only about planning what pieces of work to be done, how much of work should be done, but also about how we would achieve it. The team spends a couple of hours sitting together to understand the sequence or who does what after what and how would they coordinate these efforts for that particular sprint goal. Um, there was a time when, if I'm not wrong, Agile was described as shorter waterfall models. So it used to go in sequence, the same waterfall, but in a shorter cycles. And today is the time where we have technology like DevOps and automation, where you just check in the code, the build just happens automatically. You might not even require a tester. But if there is a team somewhere in the middle of this whole thing, there is still existing QA team, there is still existing development team, there is still existing DA team, or a UI developer. Now they all know what to achieve in that sprint goal. They start on with their piece of work because UI may start with the wireframework, the APIs may start with the API development, and the dev team may start their mobile development work. And then there's a QA team which starts with its test cases and writing test scenarios. They decide they would internally coordinate on a certain date. But generally, the Scrum is about a 2 weeks period. Now, how efficiently can the Scrum team work among themselves internally? They could keep 3 builds within the same Scrum, or sometimes they may run out of time, and if there is a delay from one of the aspects, so the requirements go back and forth, how efficiently the Scrum team can work among themselves internally in this kind of setup.
So I'm just clarifying your question and let much and make me correct. So what I'm understanding is you are thinking of, for an hypothetical example, there are 9 people Scrum team, but 2 of them are UX
Right.
people and 4 of them are development people, and 2 of them are test people. And
Mm.
the UX guys are planning
Right.
their work pretty independently, and the developers plan their work pretty independently, and the testers plan their work pretty
Right.
independently. Is this a fact?
Initially, they coordinate as to what they have to achieve in that sprint goal, but then they go back to doing their piece of work so that they can finally integrate it for that particular sprint. The reason I'm asking is how exactly to avoid the waterfall trap, because eventually what will happen, the BA, say instance you add BA also into that team, the BA has to do something and design the user story, and or say for instance, okay, let me say that the requirements were already developed, the user stories were already ready. But now the UI team has to, design the wireframe. And until that design is ready, even though the mobile app team is ready with their development, they can't integrate it into the UI or test it along with the UI. And there are so many aspects to it. So eventually it'll be like UI doing first, and then the development team keeping its work ready, and then the QA getting into the scene. So it turns out to be a waterfall model
And what is the
eventually.
problem with that? If
So
if that turns out to like that, what is the problem you see in that? What you
uh-huh.
miss by having that?
um, Firstly, while that is happening, each until the work reaches the next person, the person may be idle. It might not be that the person is used
Okay, so one is
fully
that
or
you are worried
efficiently.
about is that people are not busy, but in waterfall also we can make it busy in some way, but that's a one thing. Okay, what next?
Mm-hmm.
What is
Yeah,
the other
so
concern?
so that's my main concern, because though we say that teams can work together, sometimes they also say that there should be a cross-functional knowledge sharing. The developer itself becomes tester, and the tester also starts developing eventually, and training themselves. So eventually the team could go in that direction also. So there are various kind of ways to approach this, but practically, I feel most of them end up doing waterfall only,
So
with
I think
pre-builds in a
if you are only worried about utilization, then you can achieve it by doing say UI sprint and dev sprint and test sprint separately. I'm not saying they are good thing to do, but I have seen many doing it. So we can say the development sprint is N,
Mhm.
UI sprint is focusing on N
Mhm.
plus 1, and the test sprint is focusing on
Mhm.
N minus 1. And you just always continue like that. And so that technically
So
speaking,
that eventually,
always the 3 sprints are going on and people feel they are doing good job because they are utilizing everyone.
okay, so all of them start at the same time, but they deliver it in N plus 1 and N plus
Yeah,
2, something
so
like that.
that's one of the flavor which has been people using, yeah, for who are primarily
Mhm.
focused on utilization of people. They have been using that. So if your concern is only utilization, you can do
Mhm.
that. But there is a big concern. It is a feedback cycle. So if I have designed something, if I have designed something wrong in my UI, it will take 3 iterations before it will become visible to stakeholders, because I am working on
Exactly. So
I plus 1.
eventually, is a waterfall method.
So say waterfall is a name. The only thing is it delays the feedback. Yeah, so the whole idea here
Mm.
is what problem we are trying to solve. If we are trying to make people busy, you can make people busy. You can make sure that you must be working on the story which I will work next month, and developer is working on the story which my UX guy have was work already in the previous month, and then testers are already testing something which my developer has developed the previous month. Now I have seen those kind of
Mm.
projects happening. I think 6 7 years more. Nowadays it's very very less, but that was the way people got into it. Now there is always confusion. Developer is going to the UX guy to telling, this is not working well, you need to change this. And the testers are coming to the developers guy that these are the bugs which we are finding in your previous iteration, they are not working. And the developer will say, please don't disturb me, I already have a next sprint. And then the defects keep getting
Right.
accumulated because I am working on my next sprint and I don't want to care for the thing which you have been doing. So the whole idea of utilization will make people waste work. Now, what is the alternative? When my focus is I need to start few works and I need to make sure that few work get finished faster. And if there is a feedback, I can collect that feedback earlier. Then I want to make the items more and more and more and small as possible. And I try to do that. Okay, is it possible I may have some amount of UX work done in advance, maybe some amount of UX work done in advance, depending upon the nature of the work. You may call with the help of, say, spikes or technical stories. You may do some amount of work ahead in time, but good amount of work does inside this same sprint. Because when the developer is doing something, they get a feedback, they take it to the UX guy, they fix it. At the same time, on the same story, tester is testing it, some part of the user story, not the complete one. They find some issue, they come back to the developer is still working on the same user story so that he can fix it. So the whole idea here is make the work into a more and more small chunks. Ultimately, there will be an engineering sequence. You can't ignore that analyzing the requirement, designing it, developing it and revalidating it and validating along the development and then showing it to the customer. These all steps will be always there.
Right.
But the whole idea here is we are just trying to make them done in the overall step get shrink in a smaller pace so they don't spread across 3 months. Because in the focus of utilizing people, these steps got expanded into multiple months, which resulted into, first, maybe it resulted into a utilization of people, but it also resulted into delay in feedback and then accumulation of unplanned work, because only after 3 months I can know that this story was actually not done. And I have faced personally that problem multiple times. Everything was great, UX was great, developer was great, and by the time tester sees it, he sees it's a confusion. And by the time both tester and developer go to the business analyst, and then he goes to the client and says, we got the requirement wrong. And then it's already 2 months, because by the time testers looked at it, it's already 3 sprints. Already 3 sprints, and now the business get confused. It says, this is not actually I want to change it. Now, by that time, already there are a lot of things in progress based on that assumption, which was made 3 sprints ago. So the whole idea here is it may make little bit less utilization in some point in time. And that is something you need to look into your team composition. You need to design your team in such a way so that it has a desired number of skills in an appropriate quantity. Again, there is no perfect formula, but you don't add that many resources or that many type of skill, which might be leading or not leading to a better flow. Once you are done with that, then you ensure the small items are coming and they are finishing in totality so that we can collect the feedback. And I don't say it's a waterfall or not waterfall. The whole idea here is we are reducing the batch size. We are keeping the less work item in progress so that we can change direction fast, because I may see something at the end of 2 weeks and I say, I don't need anything which is linked with this feature anymore. Yeah, so I take that decision and I don't have to rework much. I can just drop those features. If I make multiple items open, as soon as I get a feedback, I might have already invested a lot of other things in it, because a lot of things were in progress at that point in time.
Got it, Saket. So I think I got my answer. The best way, if it's possible, then we can achieve things within a sprint itself. But otherwise, we distribute it among the different stakeholder groups or the teams over sprints, but keep it as shorter as possible. In terms of work and cycles, so that you realize the MVP or you realize the software as soon as possible.
And then if somebody,
I gather that, but it depends on the context.
Yes, and if somebody is facing this problem and doing it, he must be facing these problems also. If I am doing these n plus 1 and n minus 1 and I have no problem, and my work is doing all good, looks like I don't need Scrum, then better I don't even call them sprint and I keep doing the way I am doing. So if doing in this particular way is not hampering me, because looks like that I have a very good understanding of requirement, The feedbacks are rarely coming. The developers
Mhm.
can code well, tester can predict the work well, and the UI guys can predict the work well, and there is no confusion. Then stop calling it Scrum. Also, you are enjoying and keep doing what you are doing. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Satya. So, um, as a follow-up to that, when does Scrum and Kanban work together best? Because if I'm running sprints and there are defects that are for the previous work that was finished, and those defects keep adding to the product backlog, and in my subsequent sprints I'm also planning to kind of take up those defects, then I might not really need Kanban. I know Kanban on its own works best for a unpredictable environment, or when there is maintenance and support sort of work where you don't really have to plan sprints. You are taking work in a continuous fashion. But there are engagements and projects which handle both Scrum and Kanban together. So, what are the best examples or cases around it?
See, one of the thing is that the way you explained handling defect, it was kind of inclined to our previous discussion where things were in progress and we were unable to take care of a feedback in the same sprint, and they keep getting accumulated. And as you see, that problem will result into multiple problems because we need to have a priority management problem and people allocation problem, and all those things will start emerging once we have that. Now, see, you can use Kanban with anything along with Scrum also. And it is more about, we just need to see what is Kanban and how it helps. So the essence of Kanban is pretty simple, ensuring that you have a smooth flow of work. You are limiting work in progress and you are monitoring how things are moving end to end. Now you can do sprint, you cannot, you may live without sprint. It doesn't matter, yeah, because that is your Kanban system design. So what you need to see here is that, okay, sometime you may say in a given 2 weeks, I have a predictable work and I have an unpredictable work. And the predictable work I will plan during sprint planning, and unpredictable work I will not plan during sprint planning. And I will keep my unpredictable work visible. Okay. Yeah. So you can call it that I'm using Kanban, or you can call it I'm still using Scrum, but we have some capacity allocated to unpredictable work, and supporting unpredictable work is part of our sprint goal, and we just don't cross that limit. Yeah? So that's the fair way of saying it. What I usually see is when people use Kanban, or when they start saying we are using Kanban, they stop dropping some of the Scrum framework elements. Say, I don't want to limit my work to sprints. I may want to work beyond sprints. I don't want to time box my finishing. I want to keep continuing what I am doing. So if you see that kind of a need is emerging, then you may stop doing Scrum and keep working and visualizing your work using Kanban. So there is no a particular case. It's good if you wanna check it out. You can check the video related to CanFN framework, which will talk about like complex system, complicated system, and simple system, and chaotic system. So which will give some idea. You can just type on YouTube. So the Scrum is a great thing to do when you are inspecting and adapting frequently. But when you have the fair understanding of what you are doing, and people are not going to come to you and give a feedback, but they want to see the product in their live environment. And over a period of time, nobody is appearing for sprint reviews, but they are looking for the feature in the direct production thing. And people are also finding difficult to split the work and fit into a user story, and they believe, I am giving you a work, can you finish it in a 3 weeks or 4 weeks time? Just tell me when it gets done. Don't tell me how many iterations it will take. Just tell me which week is going to finish. So if you start getting those kind of environment, looks like that you are going away from the type of places where Scrum was ideal, and you might need to modify your way of working. And the modified way of working, you may visualize using Kanban, and you may call it a Kanban system, but you need to design your system. Kanban is not a ready-made system for you. There is nothing ready-made from Kanban.
Right,
You need to design yourself.
right, right.
So it's
Got it,
difficult to give
Satya.
that directly recommendation based on A or B. Yeah.
depending on the situation.
Yes,
True.
yes, yes.
And going back to the a little earlier what we spoke, and as we speak about this as well, I can connect the dots that we could also use the two frameworks in a situation where you said, initially few sprints you want to experiment, you don't know how much work the team wants to take. We can use Kanban in the initial few sprints, and when things become more predictable, start using Scrum. I mean, that's something that I'm thinking as we speak. That could also be one of the scenarios of this.
So you can say when you are, I'm just doing explorations and I don't know what I'm going to work for the whole week, whatever iteration length you want to put in, you may just visualize your work and keep doing it. But once I start getting a sense of my
Right.
product vision, once I get a sense of my product backlog, I say, okay, now changing direction on daily basis will confuse people and I have more people as well. Then better I give them little predictable box that guys, you have next 2 weeks, you don't have to think about anything else. Just get this part done so that they get something done. Then the Scrum is the best thing to do. So you have spent some time to get that level of
Right.
predictability, and then you don't know exactly what you want to make, because that's why you are not predicting beyond a sprint length. But at least for a sprint length, you give an experiment time and let people explore. Good. Yeah.
Okay. Having spoken about inspect and adapt, now this is a little vague, and apologize if I am sounding naive also in this question. But then, as you said, Scrum is the whole process of inspecting and adapting, right? We kind of inspect and adapt in certain Scrum events, which is the best forum to do that. Or otherwise on a daily, otherwise on a ad hoc basis as well. Now, when we give this leeway to the Scrum team, right, which also consists of the Scrum Master, now to what degree we can do this inspect and adapt? Because now if we allow leeway in a certain aspect, then the team may want to be flexible in all other aspects as well. So how to really kind of convey and communicate to the team that, here is where you can inspect and adapt, or here are the areas where you can inspect and adapt, versus just letting the team on its own, and which may result in over reliance on the team, and then that could lead to something else. So
Yeah.
how to kind of
See, the whole
manage
idea
this?
here is that it is something like the way Scaled Agile put it very well. They have a principle. It's about centralization versus decentralization. So we need to have a clarity, which are the areas where team can take their own decisions, and which are the area where team need to consult with someone, and which are the areas where the decision will be taken by someone else. Yeah. So team cannot decide to start taking off on Monday. They feel that they are doing good, but probably in that particular environment, Monday is the one where business is available to answer your questions, and you want to take off on the Monday only. Yeah? So maybe you are not that level allowed in a given context. So this is all, I would say, kind of a way we need to implement it. I have a simple thing I think I put into a video as well, and I talk about responsibility
Right.
and freedom. So these two dimensions has to be managed. If you see the teams are becoming more
Right.
and more responsible, you start giving them more and more freedom so that they grow, they start owning more. And if you give them a freedom before they are feeling they have a sense of responsibility, they will go in a wrong direction or a derailed direction where the organization don't want to take them. So the organization or any logical leader, whatever label the leader has, will reduce the freedom. He says, no, guys, this is not making sense. You are not having all these freedoms. I need to keep you here. So there has to be a fine balance between responsibility and freedom. And as a leader, you call me a scrum master or agile coach, whatever it is, I need to challenge them so that people take more and more responsibility and I give more and more freedom to them. And ultimately there will be few areas. So, and the thing is, there is a one team level behavior and there will be another individual level behavior also. So inside the same team, some people will have a better sense of responsibility than others. So individual may have also a different degree of freedom. Sometimes the degree of a freedom is controlled by the team management itself, that who is expected to have how much freedom. and you keep doing it in your daily work also. You are working with the 3 people. To few you give a detailed instruction, for others you don't even tell them what to do, they figure it out. So it's an emerging thing. Just because somebody is saying inspect and adapt, so that's an inspect and adapt. You are inspecting and adapting on balancing responsibility and freedom. And you can have your team working agreement. Usually this is a step which Scrum Master should take by way of putting it as a working agreement or a team charter. You start the work and says, okay, these are our boundaries. This is how we want to operate. Over a period of time, these working agreement and charter may not hold, because because it goes into the mind of the people. So automatically they emerge. But initially, when you are in a very new state, they may be a good instrument to remind people that, okay, where we can take decision, where we need to consult with someone, and where the decision will be taken by someone else, and we need to support that. Yeah, so it's a product related thing.
Yes, adding on to that, now when we do an inspect and adopt process, most of the time could be a scope negotiation and changing scope, because things get added on. Business might change priorities and things like that. And how to keep the sprint goal, because generally the sprint goal is fixed, right? And when you keep on changing the scope, and maybe it's required in that particular context, where suddenly there's a customer demand, and then it translates into the business requirement, and you have to take that and prioritize over others. Now, being a flexible environment, you can also reconsider your scope in every sprint. Now, how to keep, if that is done, but where Scrum Guide talks about sprint goal being fixed, and
perfect.
Mostly you work towards it.
Yeah.
How?
So this is something we can take, and I think this is where we close the current conversation, and we can do a follow-up conversation later. Yeah. Final question, this one?
There are around few more, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Let's see if we can.
No problem. We can close the recording and then. Yeah.
No, we can take 2 more, and let's see if we can do that. Okay.
I'm sorry. I've exhausting
you. Sure. No problem. Let's look at a sprint goal first. See, one thing is, nobody in your development organization will care what is written in a particular guide. They don't care. If it is written, it is written. How does it impact me? And if in a practical way, if you give those references, either people will just throw that reference, or they will find you too theoretical in nature. So my recommendation is, as a practitioner like Scrum Master, Agile coaches, we need to understand the intent behind the recommendation and share that intent, and also see what kind of a risk can happen when people don't follow that. And we also know when are the situation where it is good to not to follow that. Yeah. So that's the whole piece. We are not saying that sprint goal is A or B, because you are not a kind of a promoter of a particular guide. You are there to get the development done. That's your goal. Now, what is the goal? The essence here is, if we frequently keep changing our direction, we generate waste. So it's like this, that you decided that we want to do 5 stories. And by the time you started discussing, designing those stories, because you were doing sprint planning, everybody allocated good amount of time and energy to it. You had so many discussions around it. And after some time, you are saying these 2 are not needed, or these 2 needs to be replaced. Okay. Maybe once it is okay, but again, now there could be 2 possible reasons. One possible reason is that we are not spending enough time to bring predictability for a sprint duration. That could be one thing. So we need to do that. Or our sprint duration is too long. Maybe the priorities cannot remain unchanged for, say, a 3 weeks long sprint. We may need to reduce it to 2 weeks or 1 week. That could be something. Or third is that the environment itself is not suitable for Scrum. We should be working in something where the requirement can change on a daily basis. So we need to figure it out which one out of these 3 is right for us. Yeah. So if you assume that it is a Scrum environment, this is only happening once in a while, or this is happening because of not looking at the analysis clearly so not getting backlog ready for the sprint, then you can show that how you are losing the capacity or how you are creating a waste by changing these frequent direction. Might be you could finish 5 items, but since you change the direction, you could only finish 2 items. So as a scrum master, I need to make this thing visible. And I also show that these frequent changes also demotivate people because they wanted to finish something which they have started. So we put this whole thing in the perspective, and then we pursue how can we have stable sprints. And if we achieve that goal, we continue with the scrum, else we discontinue with the scrum. So that's how probably one can work on. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you want to do this, Saket? Do you want to,
We can do that next
for
two. Yeah. I
now,
think let's finish the agile and scrum, this conversation only. So bring your next two as well. Yeah. Go ahead.
okay. So if I have to pick among them, I want to understand about estimation during product backlog refinement. Now, we understand that during sprint planning, we do a detailed estimation, but there is also, during product backlog refinement, in order to prioritize based on business value and a fair amount of, say, ballpark estimation that we have to do. Um, who is involved during this process, and to what extent of estimation can we do? Does this also uh, involve story point estimation, or is it just a horizon level estimation like release planning and things like that?
So I have seen both the things, and it all depends upon like what are the stakes, what is the value of predictability, and how much scope is predictable, how much requirement clarity is there. So assuming if you are done with the first release and you are planning upcoming releases, then you will involve, if it's a small team, people will involve team because they want to have better clarity and better understanding in their planning. So if I don't involve team, my planning will be little less predictable. I will have a more vagueness in my roadmap. Yeah? Because it is not like I can estimate and team will achieve it. That's not going to happen. I can dream about that, but in reality, it will not happen. You use Scrum or you don't use Scrum, but it won't happen. So what is the use of estimation? To give some projection and make a judgment based on that projection. So many times, as I said, like when we get a one-page requirement, we make the backlog and do an estimation. At that time, I don't even have a team. Like I don't even know who all guys will come and work with me. And many times when I am doing, many times when I'm doing a future planning, next 1 year planning, I don't think it's a use of explaining all these things to the development team because many of these things may never touch the reality. Yeah. So they may never come up. Yeah. But my management structure wants to see a little roadmap so they can allocate some budget and some energy for that particular work. So I may take few selective member and says, guys, we need to do a little a forecast and an upfront or a forward-looking planning. And that forward-looking planning has this goal. And this is how we do an estimate and we give that particular planning. Now, only problem starts coming in when people don't have an understanding of the goal. They do a forward-looking planning, but they want to make sure that the forward-looking planning becomes predictable and achievable by the development team. And this is, we have already decided this all has to happen. Now you just need to do that. So that is where the whole confusion will start. If you can resolve that particular problem, usually you see how much predictability is needed, and accordingly you involve people.
See, surely, one job of a product owner is to plan the releases or lay out a product roadmap. That is one part of it. But while prioritizing user stories, is it okay to just prioritize based on the business value because you might not really want to get into estimation, or avoid duplication because anyways the team is going to estimate it going forward? So that's where otherwise it will result in two-level estimation, right?
And that if the two-level estimation helps you do that, if it does not, don't do that. Now let me tell you how. So if your organization has an environment where they want to decide based on, say, assuming I have a 6 months available, and I can say I can only give this team 6 months. Yeah. Now you need to figure it out what all will fit into 6 months. then this 2-level estimation is needed, because I also need to fit. The prioritization will depend upon what fits into 6 months, not only on the basis of business value. Yeah. That's in
Right,
that
right.
particular case, I need to do this level estimate, and there has to be some stakeholders who can help me doing that, not necessarily the whole team. Now, if I have this my
Right.
team and they are going to remain there for next 1 year, 2 year, and I just want to get the right priority work item done by them, then and I'm not focusing on which goes into quarter 1 and which goes into quarter 2. I have kind of a sequence only. Then you may not require. You can say, okay, we will tell you what is coming next, and based on whenever it reaches you, you estimate and you get it done, or you don't even estimate and you get it done. So then it will not be needed. But in most enterprises, especially where they want to have some sense of predictability, I would see a good need of doing 2-level estimation. And I won't consider it as a duplication. I consider it as a separate job. When I'm doing level 1 estimate, my intent is to show a forecast, to help prioritization, to help sequencing, to help planning the complete product roadmap. When I'm doing second level, it is primarily focusing on operational and execution approach. So the first level estimation is primarily focusing on strategy and planning, whereas a second level estimation is primarily focusing on execution and sequencing for execution. So which might be anyway needed when I want to get into execution step.
Okay, clear, Saket. Let's make it the last one. Though I have few more, but I'll keep one important one that I want to understand. That is the ROI that we get out of Scrum projects. Now I'll combine 2-3 questions. Maybe the answer is the same. One is, what are the ways in which ROI can be realized for a Scrum project, and how do we convince the management, senior management leader, the real tangible benefits of Scrum? And mostly that is shown through reporting and progress tracking. So what generally at the team level we track burn down charts, release level burn down charts, or sprint burn down charts, or velocity per sprint, and tell them, listen, earlier it used to take so many sprints to achieve a similar kind of work, but now we have reduced it over a period of time, and we are realizing value very early. That's one way, but is that the only things? And can you just give more depth to this particular question as to what are the ROIs, ways of realizing ROIs for a Scrum project?
Perfect. See, this one is depending on who is asking for it. Now, let me explain. There are organizations who are looking for better ways of doing things, and they see that frequent inspect and adapt helps, and that much information is good enough for them to get started with, say, with Scrum. They don't need anything else. Whereas some organization will ask you, can you produce a case study and show me how much money a given organization has saved by doing Scrum? So now, first is, usually the initial adapters and innovators are not going into the case study approach, but there could be people who might go into that space. So it is primarily a guessing game. Yeah. And you need to, again, start with the projection and validate it after an iteration. Now, how do you get a value from a particular way of working? Now, what is returns? And why should you invest in Scrum? So first you need to find out, what are you investing? You already have the same people. Are you buying or are you hiring something special skilled individuals for getting into Scrum? Or they are the same one who are working before. So if the working before population remains the same, then your investment is more or less the same. Maybe sometime people say, oh no, but we want to send people on the training, so you want to send 20 people on the training, and what returns I get out of it. So there could be a possibility of training level returns, but that's the one thing is. Now, the essence of value from iterative and incremental development, you call it Scrum, you call it Kanban, and you call it whatever you want, is primarily quantifying cost of delay and ensuring that you are progressively addressing those points which are costing organization a lot. So the essence of ROI is, if I deliver something today, even a part of a solution, what benefit I get out of it? Because if I delay that piece by 6 months, what do you lose by that 6 months? And that is the biggest return projection. The other return projection related to you will save cost, you will not need 20 developers, you will only need 18 developers. They are very small in nature, might be there by with the help of automation and all, but the major return is early delivery, early feedback. And how do you quantify that? That's a business decision. Usually it's not easy to quantify what I'm getting by releasing it 1 month in advance, what I'm getting by integrating everything 1 month in advance, what I'm getting by learning 1 month in advance about something which might have been become a good big rework later on. So as a consultant, we need to see the current ways of working and what are the things which are creating pain, and need to show how possibly those pain can get resolved by different way of working. Yeah, again, it will be an hypothesis, but based on that hypothesis, people may accept your plan or may reject your plan. And I see many of the Agile and Scrum guys may not want to do that particular activity, but nowadays many pragmatic organizations are getting into Agile world, and they may ask this question. And you need to ask again that what are you losing by not having feedback early? What are you losing by not delivering part of the solution to your customer early? Because that quantification will help us in identifying what possibly we can earn by releasing products early for the feedback, for validation, for risk mitigations. So something like that.
Okay, and what is the how can the Scrum Master and product owner contribute in this regard? Because we understand that the product owner is looking to maximize the value out of the Scrum team. Similarly, what is that the Scrum Master's goal for the ROI or benefits?
Perfect. So in a clear word,
let me rephrase. What is the Scrum Master's what is the Scrum
contribution.
Master's role in achieving the contribution in achieving that ROI?
Great. Now there are two dimensions to it. One is that working on the right requirement and reducing cost of delay, which is a product owner working on, working in a right way, so that reducing the reworks and mitigating risk is a Scrum Master role. So how do I ensure that feedbacks are captured early and often? So the Scrum Master improves return on investment by reducing the cost of rework. The Scrum Master improves the ROI by reducing the risk associated with delayed feedback. Yeah, the Scrum Master is creating an environment which is making the organization adapt to the direction very fast, because product owner wants to go somewhere, but can the team really go that way, that side with ease? So Scrum Master helps the development team to come up with the better development processes, better engineering practices, and always remaining open for such kind of directional changes, and also working in a way where quality is inbuilt in the system. So we have less and less rework. And these are the dimension which Scrum Master might be focusing on, building it right, I would say. That's the whole idea of a Scrum Master thing.
Okay, yes, I think that answers my question.
Good.
So,
yeah, great. It was nice talking.
Quite a lot of discussion. I could go on and on like this, but yes, I think
we can do a subsequent one.
It was good.
Yeah. So what I recommend is, based on what we discussed, we will put the video as well, so you can refer it back. And based on that, maybe you may come up with the new ideas, new challenges, or new queries, whatever you call it, and we can have a subsequent call and probably resolve that part of it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So good place to close.
Yes. Okay. So ending. Yeah, you can close this call. But can I speak something else now? Or is this getting recorded? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So we close this conversation. Let me stop it. Yeah. So good. I think in general, I enjoyed talking, and let's see if we have a collection of things which we can explore in our subsequent calls. Yeah.
Thank you.